My time to myself is sacred. 7 p.m., everything goes silent. I do not answer emails. I don't look at my phone. I spend at least an hour in nature every day. I've had access to everything. The best that money can buy. I have a hyperbaric chamber there. I have an infrared sauna behind me. I have a PEMF right underneath me. What I truly found, what nature has to provide, is the single most powerful thing that you could do about your longevity and you holistically as a human being. There are certain aspects of my existence that are non-negotiable, and these are some of them.
Dr. Elie, I am thrilled to have you on this podcast because it's not often I get to speak to a pioneering biohacker about all things performance and longevity, but you are that person. So I'm going to quiz you on all of those things in just a moment. But before we get there, I wanted to establish your story. Most people have a story that takes them down this path. And like all others, you'll have your own as well. And I just wanted you to expand on the year that things went wrong for you is sort of the year that you put down to learning a great deal about those various things and actually how to then come up with a toolkit moving forwards in life. Can you just expand a bit more on what happened and why it led to where you are now?
Well, thank you first for that introduction. My ego loved it. I am really, the way I pace myself is that I'm always sort of learning and I don't know what I don't know. So it's always a learning process. So about my story, I think it's slightly different than most people. I don't have a life-changing moment where I had this critical disease that I had to overcome. And so it's not in that sense. However, it's pretty interesting still. Let me take you back to the 80s. I was born in Lebanon, and at the time, it was one of the worst time in the history of that troubled area. I'm an only boy in a family, and they were like literally knocking on door to door to pick up guys so they can join militias and things like that, right? So it's one of those weird times that, you know, in humanity's history. I threw myself, I think it was a self-protection mechanism of throwing myself into fitness. So I really went down. It was complete. And I later on in life, fairly recently, when I began, by recently, I mean like a decade ago, when I began introspecting and looking at where my traumas came from and how did I get into this, and people asking me this question, I realized this is where it started. It started as self-preservation, that I was trying to be as strong as possible, just in case I was taken, or if I can get away, can I be strong enough to do that? And then it turned, ironically, as life is always, ironically, it turned out to be the stem, the root of an incredible life. So it could have gone very horribly wrong. Thankfully, I'm here today talking to you. And then throughout my life, I had instances where it kind of reminded me of what does it mean to preserve health? What does it mean to keep it as your number one priority? What does it mean to live life to the fullest? And I think different people have different interpretations for this, but mine was another defining moment in my life when I lost both my parents within a period of like a 3 months separation between them, which taught me a lot, by the way, as sad as it may be. And they're both to chronic diseases, both to cancer. It was a different time, obviously, and I've learned a lot from them. But what happened is it helped me. Again, I only found out later. At the time, I was, feeling self-pity and why the universe does this to you and all of that. And then later on, you realize that everything happens for a reason. And then it sort of threw me into, because what happened quickly is that when my mom died, my dad followed her 3 months later. So what happened is that I realized that my dad could have been much better, but what he lost mostly is his purpose. And it's one of the things that I've actually studied quite a bit, moving on, and the importance of it. And part of some of the research that I've done at Harvard was also in relationship to this. So I learned very quickly that there are things that are perhaps not the most obvious, that contribute directly to your longevity and not leaving years on the table. It was incredible for me to see that human relations have so much impact on our own health and our own longevity. So I think I 100% believe that he would have lived maybe another decade if my mom was still alive. He just felt defeated and he just was ready to go. And then he went. So these moments were other defining moments in my life. And this was almost like 20 years ago that helped me to continue to kind of down that path and kind of grow more into it. And then later on, I found out that my sister is now fighting a chronic illness and is also cancer. She actually lives in the UK too. And she's been suffering horribly for maybe 7 years now. And again, I don't know how much of this can be prevented. And there are obviously certain limitations. And because of our hubris and the way we approach all of this, we think that we are in control. That's why I fight against the current of how we talk about longevity and biohacking right now. As perhaps you know, my focus is on my region, so I don't speak globally because I think biohacking and longevity are very geographical. They need to be geographically relevant. So, and again, my approach to longevity, maybe we'll get into this later on, is a little bit different. So that's kind of how it is. It's not that interesting, but for me, looking back, it just seemed like in perfect harmony of how these things were lined up for me to be, where I am today and where my biological age is and where I am, and generally the influence that I have on my community, my family, my friends, the people that follow me, and so on.
We'll probably get into it, but also this attitude piece. I mean, you alluded to it there, but this positive mental attitude and the approach that someone can take via there's the defeatist attitude, like you say, or there's I'm going to go and do something about this attitude. And is there any science really behind how that can affect change, but behind actually how that can change things up for the better, just to have a great outlook?
Well, there's science and pseudoscience. So there's that Harvard study that I've alluded to that was done almost for a century of trying to find out why or what are the sources of happiness, what are the sources of making people being more content and more purposeful in their lives. And it was exactly that. It was the people around you, the community that you are a part of, is having the chance or the environment that allows you not to blame the world. Most of us do. We think the world owes us everything, instead of looking at it as this is our habitat. And habitats, by definition, everything is there for you. And obviously there are certain things that you have to navigate for sure. So there's that. And I don't know if you know the definition of happiness. The definition of happiness, the one that I believe in at least, is life minus expectations. And that's kind of like the formula, if you like, for it. Simplified, of course, is not having expectations. It's about managing them, and you could be a lot happier. And that's what I think I do well. And the people that I consult with and the people that I work with, obviously, as I said at the beginning, I'm always learning, but I think I do that well. And as you grow older, and hopefully wiser, you're able to do this a little bit better. And if you tie this with a vitality of a younger biology, that's, I think, the best. That's why I love the time that we are in. We're able to do that. And then the other side of it is the so-called blue zones. We're not supposed to call them that anymore and all of that, But I mean, these guys, they don't biohack. They don't have gene therapies. They don't do stem cells. They don't, they're not into all of that. What they do have, however, is purpose, culture, family, working the land, eating healthy, spending time outside. And that's all it takes for them to live longer than most of us. They do concentration in these areas. So I think we overcomplicated in a lot of sense. I think these are a good, because when it comes about talking about this, we have little data. We think that we know everything about this, we know nothing, that's perhaps less than nothing. And what we're doing is all conjecture, and it's all about, sort of posturing and want to, say that this is the ultimate and this is that. And I want, for clicks or for whatever. Again, I like to hear myself say the word hubris because I want to control mine always. So there's a lot for us to still learn. But I think one beautiful and most powerful place to start is purpose and connection.
As an aside, I was listening to someone the other day describe, talking about expectations and happiness. Someone described a successful marriage as marrying somebody with low expectations, which just made me giggle and made me laugh about what you'd said there. But going back to the geography piece, because I think you're bang on when you're talking about this. I mean, you're specific to your region, like you say. So you're in Dubai, and. Yes. And why is it important to have that in mind when talking about longevity, when talking about, biohacking and these areas that we're discussing?
So with biohacking, the word bio is your, biology. It's the area that you are, the environment that you are in. If I were to zoom out a little bit and start there, you may not love this, but we're all one. Everything is one, right? And as you move in geography, whatever microbiome, whatever influences of that region becomes part of your microbiome. So if I take someone in the US and take someone that lives in the desert with different humidity, different ionization, different amount of light, different types of food, water is different, sleep interruptions are different. The way we see ourselves from a motivational perspective or from an ambition perspective, the way our family values are, and so on. Now, all of these are pretty prominent. I cannot base my own health metrics at data that was collected in a very different geography. So, and it's funny, it doesn't only apply to people that were born here. Georgie, if you move to Dubai, in a few weeks' time, your microbiome will become local.
Yeah.
We adjust, right?
But it's such a sensible but simple concept, this. And yet I don't think many people grasp it because you have a sort of a globalization attached to this idea of biohacking. But actually, it's as simple as we were based in New Zealand for a period of time, and my hay fever was off the charts there because I wasn't or hadn't been in any way, hadn't been exposed to the various different pollen scenarios that grow there. So, of course, I had to learn that and become more receptive to it. And over time, I guess, if I'd stayed there for a period of years, I would have become much better at dealing with that. So, I mean, it's simple stuff, but I don't think we think of this in those terms, and yet it makes complete sense.
Yes, I mean, it does. And this is what you just said is the summary of our conversation today. Everything it can be framed within that. Everything else is just fluff and maybe about 5 to 10% of influence on all of the stuff that we're talking about right now. And that's a fact. We know this, right? So what is changing now, and what the interest is growing in, is the ability to reframe that mental image of how we see health and all of that. But this doesn't mean that we all of a sudden have these incredible tools that do all sorts of things. It's just the simplest is the one, the most powerful. And what I found is the wisdom of the ages is the most powerful, biohacking tool, and not, the bulletproof coffee and my teenage son's blood and 120 different supplements per day and all of that. What truly matters, what I've learned the most, is that the strongest, most antioxidant is what my mother used to sprinkle on fattoush and tabbouleh and all of that little stuff. And it's actually a derivative of poison ivy, believe it or not. Wow. So it's called sumac. And you sprinkle it on hummus, you sprinkle it on all sorts of things, and it's part of our diet. So it's something and no one talks about it. We talk about all sorts of synthetic stuff. No one, and again, when you are following someone in the US or whatever else in the world, and I want to pick on the US, and they start, with 80% of Americans or, Europeans or whatever, that is not, and for most people don't pick up on that, unfortunately. But the thing is, it's all about education. And that's what I feel where my purpose lies. It's, two folds. The most important is education. And the second fold is being able to help as many people as possible, either by example, which is my number one thing. And then two is by, physically being there for them.
So it's really interesting because you mentioned earlier that you love the moment that we're living in right now. But the moment we're living in right now, we are being thrown various different, searches via algorithms and via our, the things that we're already interested in. We're getting pummeled with more of the same. And therefore our view is shrinking as opposed to broadening sometimes, unless we're very aware that that's what's happening and we take action accordingly. What is it, though, about now that you get excited by?
I'm excited about the how many people around me are actually changing their lives for the better.
Yeah.
And I mean in every aspect, because once you start focusing a little bit on your biology, everything else starts falling in line. Your relationships become better. You're happier at your job. You're able to navigate traffic better. Your reaction becomes less and more of an actual thoughtful interaction, and so on. So I love that. And also, because there are more people interested in this, obviously you have to always filter everything, right? So I think if we start with education in that sense and say, just filter everything, do it. And this has never changed, from one decade to the other, for whatever is the thing that we're dealing with, be it spirituality or be it physical exercise, or now be it that focus, and they're all kind of coming together, hopefully. We've always had issues with some people not filtering and not kind of stepping back and say, okay, this is humanity. That's okay. We go through this. Just go through it from a filter. The other thing that I love is how much AI is helping us do things so much quicker in this space. And the other thing for me, there are so many of them, sorry. But one more thing is how it's empowering us to take charge of our own lives. Now that's both exciting and scary, depending on who is taking charge of their own lives. But I love that.
But it comes back to that education piece that you were talking about, and how important that is. And also, I guess, we feel very strongly about being proactive about your own health and well-being. And I think that also happens at a particular time in your life, because in your 20s, most people feel fairly invincible.
That's changing.
Yes,
that's changing,
that is.
Yeah,
that is. And why do you think that is? Why do you think that is starting to change?
So social media, unfortunately, I don't have a better answer. That's the one thing in this space that is perhaps positive. You could name a few, maybe. But more people are getting excited because cooler people than me are doing certain things within that space when they see, I don't know, the Kardashian, sitting in front of a red light or talking about her recovery or whatever.
Yeah.
So more people are kind of aware of that at a younger age. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I now have people in there, I have a 22-year-old that is on my program, for example, and there's nothing wrong with her, by the way. But she realizes that the younger or the sooner she starts, the better it's going to be for her later decades. And that's something we know for a fact, So everything else is fluff, as I said, but so I kind of really like that.
So when you say live by example, and that's what you're doing, you've got a t-shirt with Limitless Human on it, which is your brand. How do I become a limitless human? What do I need to do? Dr. Elie, tell me what I need to do. Save me.
I'm going to give you a revelation right now. It's life-changing. It is no, I'm kidding. So you are already, Georgie. It's something that we just unlock within us. And obviously there's a protocol and stuff that we do. We hold ourselves back. Can you take a moment and just consider your biology? Consider the stuff that your body is capable of doing and the stuff that you've done already yourself specifically, right? not just create other humans, which is already a wow, beyond us. Imagine all of the other things that you were able to do. When I think that, my ability to run 50 marathons, for example, or summit mountains or do whatever, and just the fact that I'm able to stand here, and what does that mean for me, and the energy that I have, and all of the stuff that I do, and it's phenomenal, it's amazing. But I just unlocked it. It wasn't something that I had to put on me in order to become limitless. I just did a little bit of sort of introspection and a little bit of science and a little bit of commitment and discipline. And then I started thinking, okay, so I have a certain amount of time per day within my schedule, my life sort of schedule. What would be the greatest return on investment for me in order to be as healthy as possible, right? I can, play around with all sorts of things. I can try to be cool because it looks good on my socials or whatever. And I thought, no, I need to be more purposeful and do it with more intention. And I began to implement these. And what worked, I stuck with, and what didn't, I moved away from it. And the general concept is actually pretty simple. What I love about the last decade too, that we were able to measure certain things that we were not able to measure before.
Yeah.
Such as our biological age. I mean, diagnostics now are just phenomenal. And because there's interest on the space, it's developing at a lightning speed too. So, and they're becoming cheaper, more accessible, and so on. Becoming human is just a journey. Becoming limitless, I mean, it's just a journey. There is no end sort of point, a destination. We are already there, and we have these incredible bodies that we live in. We just abuse them. We let them go, and then we get surprised when something happens or breaks, and that always kind of shocks me when people are surprised that, something goes wrong in their body. Because if they really introspect and look back, they say, well, that is to be exactly expected. Like, this should not be a surprise to me in any way, shape, or form. What I find, no matter where I am, because I focus also on Africa, and I've set up just a clinic recently there in Kenya. That's called the Limitless Clinic, aptly named. And it's the same. It's the same there. People are overnourished. They are oversupplemented. They are under-exercised and under-recovered everywhere. No matter what room I'm in, no matter what crowd, what audience, most people overeat. That's like an overwhelming number. And again, it's emotional, it's psychological, but it's also part of our humanity. We're designed in our biology is that if there is food, we should consume it because we don't know what the next one. Obviously, that's not true in modern life, but we have that sort of trigger in our minds.
Talk to me about the being under recovered bit, because I think also that's particularly pertinent in this day and age that we live in.
Yeah, so in the last couple of years, all of my research has been focused on that, because what I found is that there's no middle ground. Very few people are in middle ground between working, and if we're talking about middle ground, we're talking about elite athletes. These are the ones that are really cracked the recovery aspect. And they are elite athletes because they have cracked the recovery aspect. It's not because they work out or exercise in a certain way that is different than the rest of us. It is in the recovery that they've cracked their performance. So there's only a tiny margin of people that have it well, that have it in the right place. And then all of us are on either side. There are either people that are aggressively pursuing comfort, and then there are other people that either dabbling with workouts or overdoing it. And then you end up with all sorts of issues. For women, it's PCOS. For men, it's hormonal imbalances. And then you get frustrated because you think, okay, so exercise is good. I'm going to do as much of it as possible. All right. So, and the whole balance between causing damage and allowing it to adapt, and then causing damage and allowing it to adapt, that is not exciting. What is exciting is the dopamine, the excitement of doing a class, of doing, sanctum, movement, or Pilates, or whatever it is, right? Or lifting weights, or lifting more weights. But when it comes to recovery, there's no real joy in it. So it makes it a little bit more difficult.
It's mundane, isn't it? It's the mundanity, which I guess
It feels mundane.
an elite athlete really understands that, because they know that
Yes.
that consistency piece is absolutely key. And doing that thing again and again, however boring it is going to get
Yes.
them to that next place. Whereas for the rest of us, I mean, it might be like, oh, I'll go for a run. Oh, well done me, I've managed to fit in a run. But you're not thinking necessarily afterwards of the warm up or the cool down or what's required to then make sure that the next day you're not aching in the ways that you shouldn't be. But I guess that's an education piece again.
100%. And what happens also is that we're creatures of habit, right? So if you love running, what do you do every day? You run. And that's the only thing that you do. So what you're doing, it's a high impact sports that doesn't really benefit the rest of your systems. And it actually eats into your muscle mass and all of that stuff, knees and all sorts of stuff that happen with you. And then you also not recover. I can guarantee you that if you go to my gym, the gym that I go to, a few days a week, I can, maybe 90% of the people there, I can tell you what they're going to do on a particular day. Because they go in and they wire to this machine, then that machine, and that machine, and they go home and they think that I've worked out. They don't realize how incredible the body is at getting comfortable with something. This is what it does best. It's no longer a workout after a few weeks, because the body says, oh, we're on this machine. Oh, I know what I need to do here. There's no need for me to develop even more or cause any trauma or, the hormetic effect or any of that stuff, because I am used to this. I've adapted to this. But people don't realize that. And then day in, day out, they're doing the exact same thing. And it breaks my heart to see this. And there's so much benefit in variety and being able to use the body's full potential to stretch, to lift, to pull, to do things fast and then slow, to grab, to all the amazing stuff that the body is capable of doing.
Yeah, just mixing the whole thing up. Talk to me about the 3-body problem.
You like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think many people got it for some reason. I thought like I might be like a little crazy, maybe. Like people might have thought
you're just ahead of your time.
might have thought that why is he so weird? So what happens in general? So what we focus on, as we said just now in the gym, is just one thing, right? So when you have one thing, your body or your mind is kind of say, okay, so I can deal with this. But when you have two, you say, okay, so I can do this. Now, the combinations of having two things, let's say working out and recovery. And I'll say, okay, so with these two things, right, I can get that down. I can organize it, maybe put it in a schedule. If someone who is really committed, educated, all of that about that stuff, they can get it down. But then let's say you add a third body problem, which is like mental health. Now there are so many variables for you to get it right. It just becomes a lot more difficult. So you need a lot more intention. You need a lot more, in the quiet moments, in between breaths. I know this sounds maybe counterproductive, but it is really important to tap into that life energy that most of us ignore, which powers everything in us, truly. If you want to, one name for it maybe is flow space or whatever it is that you want to call it, but it's a moment where many believe that all or the most creative things that man has ever created, be it the Mona Lisa, be it the Sistine Chapel, be it whatever, have come from that space where, our logic, our the way we do things with the ego and everything else does not allow it to flourish and bring art, finesse into it and some sort of order. So I was thinking about that, and I thought that actually also applies to health. When there is a three bodies that are competing, and you need to achieve all of them, it becomes so much harder for you to be able to manage them. Instead, what most people do is that they withdraw into one thing that they're good at, and they leave that alone. While instead what you should do is lean into it first of all, and then step back and let it happen. Because when you trust of your biology, when you trust that everything is for you, when you trust that everything you need is under your feet, your pharmacy is under your feet, the soil is everything for us. When you begin to understand the empowerment of how everything is for you, everything changes. It becomes a lot easier to digest.
But how do you get there? If you're somebody, like you say, who's grappling with these 3 different things going on and there's a lot happening, how do you get to that place where, like you say, you just take a step back and have a deeper, more purposeful understanding?
Yeah, so I don't think it's a place. I don't think you get to it. It's like you go into it and out of it. It's like you have moments where you kind of feel, okay, I'm not thinking of anything and everything seems to fall into place. And then once you start focusing on one thing, all of the others fall apart. And then you zone out and you're not thinking of anything and everything comes together. So I don't think it's a state that you get to. Maybe as humanity, one day we will, I don't know. But I think it's constantly a journey. It's the same with health. I always say to people, we are on a thin line. The way we're designed to take a lot of abuse from everything around us, but we're also designed to find ways to improve our own immunity. So we're walking a thin line. Some days are good and some days are bad. That's why if you track your temperature, for example, or resting heart rate or HRV, you see it constantly doing this. Your body is constantly trying to adjust to every handshake you have, every chair you sit on, every carpet you walk barefooted on, every toxins that are in the food or the air that you're breathing right now or whatever.
And what about sleep? I mean, you talk about the fact that it's so helpful now to be able to track stuff. I mean, that is a great big performance gain right there, that you now can have the ability to track. And I know it's still elementary in the technology piece, but it is getting there. And like you say, we now have it at our fingertips that we can be our own masters and commander of our sleep ship. So just talk to me a bit about why sleep is so fundamental to all of this, and just shine a light on it, if you will.
There is no greater adaptation period than sleep. We can try anything. It does not matter. You could do peptides, you could do this, nothing is as powerful as sleep. And we've known this, not recently. What I like about also the study of sleep is that we've been studying it for a long time while everything else is fairly new. So we know that quantity is not as important as quality. We know that. We know that even by increasing few minutes of deep sleep or REM sleep has, compounding effect on your growth hormones, your muscles, and your mental health. We know this for a fact. So tracking these few things, but let me just do a little caveat here. What is happening now, just in true humanity flair, is that now we're obsessed with tracking, So it doesn't work that way, because when you are obsessed, you are then kind of
influencing.
Yes, you're getting into a vicious cycle. So it becomes, when you wake up in the morning and your wearable, your tracker, whatever it is telling you didn't sleep well, even though you feel okay, you end up not feeling okay. It influences you. You take it for its word as if it's the all-knowing, not thinking that it is simply an algorithm that measures 2 or 3 things in your body and it's guessing whatever is happening with you. You are far more complex than this. I'm not saying not to measure, but what I say to people is that look at averages. Look over a week, a month, a year.
And
trends. Then look at the events that happened in your life and see what influenced them positively and what influenced them negatively, and do more positive and less negative. That's all you need to do. If you go on a night to night, it's just your worst nightmare, So having said that, I have like 3 different trackers that I use.
And I've trialed every sleep device known to man, I suspect, at this point. But that's part of your shtick, to be able to trial these things and rule some out and rule some in.
Exactly.
So do you sleep with a data wearable now?
Yes, I do, but I don't do it all the time. So what I do, this is my strategy, if you like. So what I do is I wear a ring that measures it, but I don't wear it throughout the year. So I have these bouts where and then I look at my general average and think, oh, okay, I'm still on track. So I don't have to have it all the time. Yeah. And then I pair it, when I do this, I pair it with a CGM. So then I'm also tracking my So I love stacking, right? Because you can't think just sort of pigeonhole certain things. You have to stack in order for you to get a much better picture. So, and I also, the way I pair this is that with season changes. So because obviously your biology reacts differently, circadian rhythms are different, the temperatures are different, your body constantly is adjusting. So I do a cycle, every major change in weather. And just it guides me to kind of see in general how well I'm doing. So, and then I'm fortunate enough to work with 8 Sleep. And so I represent them here in the region, and I have all of the 8 Sleep stuff. So I love 8 Sleep because it's gentle in nature. It's not as aggressive as wearables that are specifically designed for athletes. I won't say any names, but you know the ones I mean. 8 Sleep, however, is very gentle in the way that it reports, and it's more accurate because your whole body is being measured. The EMF is super low. So I like what it does, and because it works with temperature, it can actually use that data immediately in real time in order for you. This is turning into an ad for them. I don't mean that. But it's because it uses in real time. It's incredible. It's another use of technology is incredible.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's like you say, it's sort of what you can use that is affordable to you now by, you say, by nature of what's out there technology wise, but also sort of knowing that you talk about the circadian rhythm, which is, one of my great loves to talk about the circadian rhythm. But definitely, again, that chimes back to just be using the wisdom of something that has always been there. This internal body clock it's not a new device. It's just about how we now understand it better and how we can adapt to it. And I guess that plays a major part in what you're talking about, because to understand your circadian rhythm is to determine all of it.
100%. Like perhaps seeing light first thing in the morning as soon as you wake up is perhaps the single most powerful thing that you do throughout your day. Like, that's it. How silly is that? Most people think, what? Like, what are you talking about? No, it must be this, it must be that, it must be, a fancy infrared sauna, it must be whatever. It is not. Circadian, we're part of our environment. Everything is in tune and works perfectly and in an incredible balance. We know if we change the height of a step on a stair, we trip. We know that if we change the temperature of 1 or 2 degrees, half of what exists dies. There are these undeniable facts about how critical balance is, and we are a part of that balance. So being able to use the simplest of all, light, temperature, air, and where you are in your mental state, they are incredibly powerful. And I found managing your circadian rhythm, no matter what you do, because a lot of people, I was in Kenya over the weekend, and I had a talk there, and I had quite a few people in the audience that said, well, I work night shifts, I would do this, I do that. How do I manage circadian rhythm? I said, well, you can fake it. You can fake circadian rhythm by doing, and this is where tools can come in. And I said to them, this is only a temporary period of your life. It doesn't mean that you're going to be like that for the rest of your life. You just adjust now to do the best out of it. The body is extremely resilient if you allow it, if you give it the tools. So yeah, I can say, I guess the same as you, I can talk about circadian rhythm forever.
But actually that does rather neatly lead us on to a toolkit to basically put together what you can to really maximize performance, longevity, and biohack away. What is the best possible toolkit for that?
Yeah, so I say to people, you need something you can track, something that and it's not, I don't mean tracking in the social media sense. I mean in an overall, like your body. Again, remembering that our bodies don't work minute to minute. It's averages that it loves. So for me is and this is how I build my program around. I build Limitless Human around biological age, because reducing or slowing down your biological aging is perhaps impossible if one thing is not working well, be it your mental health, be it, how well you sleep, be it, your variety of exercise, be it what you put in your mouth, how you treat others, how you treat yourself, have you let go of your traumas, and so on. If you have a purpose, community, all of that. So it makes you work on all of these at the same time. And then if I want to zoom in a little bit more, I would say mitochondria. If you can work on optimizing your mitochondria, and we know so much about that now, then you should be set. However, it is not the end all. As I said, and this is, I get all the time, the number one thing, what is the one thing that you do? If I only have one thing to do, what would that be? And that, I think, when people kind of say that to me, I say that, in my inside of me, what I think is that, they're still on a journey. They need to understand that this is not how it works. There's nothing in life that is the one thing. It's always a combination of things. And when it comes to your health, you diminish some of the single most important thing that is, afforded to you, to try to hack it with one thing. I'd always joke and say, just get really good health insurance. That would be the easiest thing for you to do. But seriously though, I think that the stack for me, what I do is that my time to myself is sacred. 7 p.m., everything goes silent. I do not answer emails. I don't look at my phone. Everything is put away. I spend at least an hour in nature every day. And I know all of these sound mundane, but they are the single most, I've had access to everything. The best that money can buy, all of the toys. I have a hyperbaric chamber there. I have an infrared sauna behind me. I have a PEMF right underneath me. And there's nothing that I don't have or have access to. What I truly found is what nature has to provide is the single most powerful thing that you could do about your longevity and you holistically as a human being. So there are there are certain aspects of my existence that are non-negotiable, and these are some of them. And then I show up. When I show up, I'm 100% there. When I show up to people, I'm there. So for most of us, we always try to think of an excuse of why these things don't happen. Well, I sleep late, so I can't wake up in the morning and do it. But these work for me. Find what works for you. It's a few things like that. Nothing that will kind of be groundbreaking, perhaps, for this.
Yeah, but that's the whole point, isn't it? That is
Yes.
that is the exact point. I just want to finish on what the future looks like. I mean, we have come so far, like you say, in the last sort of, you share that incredible story, and it's not a insurmountable story about, where you grew up, how you grew up, how you decided to sort of prepare yourself for what you felt would be an inevitable one way or the other. And then obviously your family and the various suffering that you had to deal with in that very difficult year that you would have had, and how it got you to where you are now. What does the future look like for the space and the world that you're in?
I'm very, very optimistic about it because more and more people are realizing that we need to take a step back, that we don't know what we don't know. That if only, if we only increase the population age by 10%, there will be chaos. It's not about years. It is about living a meaningful life. And we've known this for decades, forever, So for millennia, we've known it's all about purposeful living. If we're focused on that, I think we'll be in great shape. Now, what I love about the time that we're in and the future that is coming is that certain technology now is going to help. Hopefully, obviously, there's always a plus and minus. Hopefully, guide us to or act as a good tool for us to be able to get there a little quicker. So access to knowledge can be, a two-edged sword, and it's who has and how it's being used. So I'm very optimistic, however, about the new generation and everyone that is coming with that space as the norm of thinking of my health. Of not too long ago, we were, bragging about how little sleep we get. Now we brag, what is our AHRV? you know? So we've made a huge shift. And if we continue on that trajectory, I think, the future looks very bright. I'm an optimist.
Yeah, well, you are absolutely an optimist, as you should be. And I'm sorry I thought that what behind you was a photo booth and not, in fact, an infrared sauna. Dr. Elie, you've made my morning. It's really great to have spoken to you. It's given me a really good perspective for the day moving ahead. I'm going to make sure I turn all my devices off from 7 p.m. tonight. And tomorrow morning, I take my dogs for a walk and remind myself why that's a really important thing to do. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for being so kind, so accommodating, and for being so amazing.
Oh, don't.